Welcome to Canuck of the Dead. For this episode, we are beginning a series where we're going to start deep diving into some of the best horror franchises around. And we're going to start with what we consider the best. And by we, I mean me and my guest today. It is the Halloween franchise. So when I decided to jump into this, which I have to say, I didn't decide on my own. A gentleman mentioned that they were fond of it, and that kind of prompted the idea. Unfortunately, he won't be able to join us at the moment, but we will get him here. But this man got me going on the whole franchise. So without any further delay, it's CF Benner from Black Fawn Distribution. Benner, how you doing?
Hey, man. How you doing, Rob? Thanks for having me on again. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And
I'm stoked to do this. Yeah.
Big time. And it was Gabe's idea, Gabe Carrer, that, his love of Halloween. It's like, well, let's do this.
Yeah, that guy's a massive Halloween fan. Obviously Gabe's a director himself, directed, For the Sake of Vicious and In House of Flies. But he's a massive Halloween fan. And he's actually, I've always loved the franchise, but not as familiar with certain entries as others. But he's always been the one that's been like, dude, Michael Myers is like he's awesome. Like he's one of the best for sure. I think that's his favorite. It's his favorite horror icon. But he's just like he's just a monster. Like he just keeps coming and coming like at you, and like so he over the years he's turned my opinion around on Michael Myers quite a bit. And revisiting the movies was really, really fun.
We will definitely get him on. The one thing that I do love about this, and you kind of mentioned it, is you're not familiar with certain things. Once you get a timeline, that tends to be your timeline, and it's very hard pressed to venture outside that circle of stories.
Yeah, 100%.
So what we're going to do today, we're going to focus on the first one, because this is the one that set the pace for absolutely everything we're about to talk about. So just for the other, 6 or 7 people that don't know, here is the trailer for the original Halloween. Now, this film set the tone for everything from that point on.
Awesome.
And you can't watch that trailer and not remember every single scene that it's showing you in your head,
It's great. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that trailer recut, like even with like today's editing. Because I bet you even if you cut it using like today's sort of, visuals and that sort of stuff, using that footage, I bet you it would still connect. It's awesome, man. I mean, even just that trailer, I think that just goes to show kind of how awesome of a villain Michael Myers really is. Obviously, Donald Pleasant's talking, like Doc Loomis talking about him. He's pure evil and just like setting that stage. But even at the end there, where he's just walking, and he's plodding, but he's walking. Like he's not so slow that it's like a little ridiculous. It's like he's coming right at you, like pretty quick, right? So yeah, man, terrifying. Awesome.
He's trucking across that street, like he has a purpose, but he's not running, And I think that's the cold factor in him, Like you said, he's plodding, and you can physically see it in his walk.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole movie is revisiting it was really, really cool. Like I said, I just got the 4K. So a lot of people have picked this up. I don't think any fan of the movie does not own this now. But it's absolutely, it's really well shot. The restoration job on it is absolutely fantastic. And it really kind of highlights exactly like what Carpenter was going for. And it's just with the shadow detail, and the blacks really pop on this transfer. And even 4K, it just looks stunning, and it's creepier, and it just hits better, I think. So it's awesome.
Well, let me ask, do you still remember the first time you ever saw this film?
I don't actually, and that's the funny thing. I can't remember when I saw it first. I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times, but I can't remember. Like there was a time when I was in high school where me and my buddies, we had a buddy of mine who his parents were divorced, and he lived with his dad, and his dad was kind of always working or out of town or whatever, right? And so we'd always go to his house. Like his house was the house, right? So and it was around the time that we were like 16, 17, and my buddy was a year older, so he was 18, or sorry, he was 19, so he could get No, he was 18, but he could get booze. Like he was just on that peak, so he could like go to the LCBO, and so we would get like giant bottles of like Mike's Hard Lemonade, and then we'd hit the video store and we'd rent a whole bunch of like horror movies, and just throw them on and watch them. And I think that's where I saw it for the first time, because we started going through like the classic like franchises, right? So we would go and we'd rent like the first, couple Halloween movies, or we'd rent the first like 3 or 4 Hellraiser movies or whatever. And then we just sit around and just get like, teenage drunk and watch like horror flicks. And that was sort of like our Friday night sometimes. And it was super fun because we just sit around and be like, wow, these movies are awesome. Or we'd rip on them depending on the movie, right? Like depending what we rented. But I think that's part of like, I've always loved movies, but that sequence of events in my youth, I think, is what really got me into horror, because it was just such a fun experience to watch flicks with your buddies, right? So,
no doubt. See, I still remember mine because I was actually babysitting the first night I decided to watch it. So
classic.
that set the tone for the rest of the night. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
the tension in that film, and that was one of the biggest things I love about it. It's not, I know it kind of set the genre slasher, but it's not like any other slasher that you see anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I know the point of view thing was really revolutionary in this movie. I know it's not the first time it's been done. I think another film had done it before Halloween, and there is an argument to be made that Psycho is the first slasher, but I
Yeah.
I don't attribute that to. I mean, I always feel like Psycho is more of a psychological thriller. I just feel like it bends differently. You can make the argument it's a brilliant film as well, and no disrespect to Psycho, of course, but I just feel that this is the film that kind of, like, even in Psycho, it was sort of like, this is a guy who's mentally deranged, and he's got problems and whatever. Whereas this movie, I think, at least as far as I remember, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the authority on this stuff, but clearly I think it's the most memorable incarnation of a character that was just, here's a guy with no explanation really. He's pure evil, and all he's just coming to kill people. And obviously that influenced all of everything that came after it was influenced by this movie. The only other flick I think that kind of falls into that category is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was obviously made a few years before Halloween. But again, I don't know if it was, I think that obviously had a huge influence, I think, on this movie, as well as movies that came after it as well. But again, I don't think the original intention of that movie was made. So not to go down the Texas Chainsaw Massacre rabbit hole, but I'm just saying, I just feel that Halloween was like, this is the movie that we're going to make. This is going to be sort of broken down in a very basic way. But the essence of the movie is it's very simple story, right? But it's also pretty terrifying, and again, a movie that was made for like a fraction of what movies are made for today, right? Even if you take into consideration inflation. So I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It's what, like 40 years old, 40,
78. Yeah.
44 years old. So 44 years old. So it's almost 50 years old, which is a pretty stunning accomplishment, for this to stand the test of time as it has.
And that was, like you said, with the tension and stuff like that. Like, it builds it like not like a normal slasher movie does, because normally they go for that jump scare, they go for the kills and all that. But this one, there's no blood, and it's just tension, like so much of it. But yet you sit there and you enjoy it, and it's a real paradox for me, especially when I'm watching it, because you're so tense.
Yeah, and there's a lot of there's that sequence where he, like I was just mentioning the 4K, and because everything's so rich, like the contrast is it's perfect, right? Like it's a perfect, basically as close as you can get to seeing the film in print, probably when it was released. And so the contrast and the blacks and the shadows are so well put together on the disc and on the transfer, that the scenes where he's sort of hiding the shadows and emerges from the shadows, which are some of my favorite scenes, because, and I can't remember seeing that in movies before, like before this one. And again, like, I'm sure I'm missing something, but it's the most iconic when he pops out. Also, I think, the the false ending as well. I don't know if that had been done before, where, you know, you think everything's okay. The in this case, Jamie Lee Curtis, like Laurie Strode's okay, she's fine. The movie is ending, quote unquote, ending, and then, you know, he sits up, which is like super awesome because he's just, again, there's nothing that can kill him, right? It's just this thing that keeps the momentum of the film going. And I don't know. I feel that that's one of the first times they ever did that. And, you know, obviously, yeah, it's pretty impactful because they've copied that numerous times, right?
True. And then that seemed to be a John Carpenter staple from that point on. If you like Prince of Darkness, Big Trouble in Little China, you know, there was all these endings that weren't real endings, but normally you'd never ever follow them up normally.
Yeah. And like I always like myself and Chad from Black Fawn, like we always talk about The Ring a lot. And The Ring was like one of the, you know, obviously The Ring is super old now too, but and obviously a remake from the Japanese flick, but they did the false ending so perfectly in that movie, and you can't help but wonder if it was influenced by Carpenter, especially this movie, right? Because it's such a gut punch to the audience, right? That they, you know, they think everyone is safe, everyone is okay, and then you know, surprise. So
Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah.
they leave the theater wondering, wait a minute, is it over? And that's I think that's, like I said, that's almost like a signature for Carpenter. Oh, The Thing, that was the other one that I was trying to remember because it's got that false ending. You know, but with Carpenter in this, like when they first came to this film, they had a whole plan set out, and you know, the way it is right now is nowhere near what his original plan was supposed to be.
Right. Yeah.
Did you?
So originally, Carpenter's idea, and a lot of people know this already, but for those of you who don't, is that they were going to make a movie every year to come out around Halloween. That was like a different scary story, basically. And this was the first one. Just, you know, maniacal, evil monster escapes mental institution, comes after innocent babysitters and townsfolk in Haddonfield. But the sequel was never supposed to be Halloween 2 per se. It was supposed to be like a completely different story, which is kind of how we ended up Halloween 3. We'll get to that later on in future episodes for sure. But an interesting idea for sure. And you have to wonder if it would have flown differently. But yeah, I mean, that was the original idea of the series, which is kind of innovative if you think about it, like even at the time period. It's too bad that I don't want to say it's too bad that it didn't pan out the way it did, but certainly something to ponder. Like if had they actually done it that way, and they were successful, like, you know, kind of what other stories we would have gotten from Carpenter, right? And you have to wonder if the movies that he made after that would have been part of this series, right? Like Big Trouble in Little China and like the other films that he made after this, right? Like you got to wonder if those were kind of earmarked to be part of this series, but hard to say.
And I always wonder if The Thing was meant to be part of that series, because in Halloween they're watching Thing from Another Planet on the TV, just like
right. Yeah.
Just
Totally.
watching Halloween in Halloween 3. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
kind of why I wondered if that was not meant to be part of that as well.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if you know, if the Thing would have been as successful as it was, if it was part of this series. Like you wonder, like, I mean, obviously they would all be called Halloween movies, right? Like Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, and but it's funny because after, you know, in the history of the franchise, you know, obviously they made Halloween 2, which is a direct sequel to this film. Then they tried something with Halloween 3, and then they went obviously back to the Michael Myers formula with varying results, and we'll obviously discuss those later on. But
Yeah.
But ultimately, every series that came after this movie, so sort of replicated that idea, like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and even recently we were just talking about this on another podcast, was Saw, right? Which is, you know, we're going to make one of these movies every year and pump it out around Halloween, and it's going to do box office numbers for us. And again, some of those series, the more you make them, the more entries in the series, it's the law of diminishing returns, right? Unless if you've got if you've got a genius working the scripts, right, which is usually not the case when these movies get up higher in the numbers of the sequel numbers, I should say. So it's interesting. I mean, I feel like Friday the 13th replicated this like this exact strategy going forward in the 80s.
Well, and that's the fun thing too with that, everybody has their favorites, but like you said, when you have a bigger number, there's always going to be that low point. And this series is crazy. It has so many low points, but it is still a loved franchise. Like I love every film, different degrees, but there's still,
Yeah.
it's because it's Michael.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing about this film is that it sets the table for everything that comes after it, obviously, right? But the mask itself,
Yeah.
the knife you could say is an homage to Psycho. I don't know if that's where Carpenter got it from, but I mean, you could make that connection, I guess. But it's the mask, right? That's so iconic. And also going through this series was really, really fun, and watching every movie. And but the difference in masks over the years, I had forgotten how crazy they get in
Yeah.
such weird and in bad ways too. And it's just it's unbelievable to me, because you think they would be able to replicate this mask. I
It,
would say they did it on the reboot series. Sorry, I should clarify that. I would say in the Rob Zombie reboot or remake, I guess, whatever you want to call it, and then obviously the new Halloween series, like the most recent one from Blumhouse, like those two series actually recreated the mask, I think, in awesome ways. But all those other like 4, 5, 6 and H2O and even Resurrection, like they're like I don't know. To me, it's like hilarious. It's like, couldn't you just find that mask and cast it again? Like, why was it so hard to
well,
replicate that mask over the years? I
it's a
don't get it.
William Shatner mask. You can literally get them,
Yeah. So I heard somewhere that it was there was a lot of like, I can't remember. I think it was on a panel with Jamie Lee Curtis, and she said there was issues with the mask because the people that created the mask owned the rights to it. It was something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it was basically like whoever was trying to recreate this mask would own the rights because they made it, right? Like the graphic or the makeup artist or the effects guy or whomever. So then they couldn't recreate it. But I don't know why they never went back to the original. Like, I don't understand that. And it's such a like it's even when I rewatched it, the first movie. I mean, the first movie is iconic. I don't think any sequel tops it. At all. And just because if you're the first, you're the original, it's
Yeah.
hard to hard to be better than that. But just the mask in the first movie looks so awesome. And in the second movie, it's the same mask, but the guy who plays Michael, I can't remember who's Michael Myers in the second movie, but is a bit bigger, right? So the mask was like didn't necessarily fit his head as well as it did in the first film.
Yeah, he had a different shaped head.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I just anyways, mind boggling. It was really, really fun to watch that those masks kind of evolve, because it's I mean, whatever. But yeah, in the first movie, it's awesome. Like it's so, and it's something about the eyes. That's the thing, that is, the eyes are dead. The mask is white. Obviously, people have made comparisons to, the Michael Myers mask kind of feeling like a great white shark, right? Like he's like the ultimate predator. It looks like he's dead. I feel like it's such a brilliant concept, and one of those things that it was a happy accident, right? Like the guy went and got like the William Shatner mask and was like, well, we'll make the eye holes a bit bigger and we'll paint it white. And it just I think just kind of like in the 70s, 80s, they were just doing shit. You know what I mean? Like we're just making movies and just trying stuff out. And there was a lot of happy accidents, I think, in those decades when they made flicks. And I think this is definitely a clear-cut example of one of them.
Big time. Now I know we were talking about the lifeless eyes, and one of the questions I always tend to ask any people I have on here for interviews is like, where did that kernel of a story come from when you put together a film? And I love the one for this one, where John Carpenter was touring a psychiatric hospital, and this one kid kept staring at him, and he said he had the most lifeless eyes, and it terrified him. And
Really?
that was the kernel that turned into Halloween.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
cool.
I saw him do that in an interview once, and it was so weird because that's not at all where I would have thought a story like this came from. Like the original title, The Babysitter Murders, right? Like that is not where I thought that kernel was going to come from.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, it's yeah, it's a perfect title. I mean, the fact that that didn't exist until 1978 is pretty interesting too. Like you think somebody would have made a movie called
Yeah,
Halloween, right?
exactly, exactly. But uh, with that title, though, the Babysitter Murders, do you think that would have captured as much as it does Halloween? Like,
No, I don't. And the reason I don't think it would have is because I think it would have gotten buried a bit more. Um, like just with the word murder in the title, I think it alienates a lot of just general audiences that would have gone to see it. I think, obviously Halloween sort of took on a life of its own. And I think just because it was called Halloween and it came out around Halloween that people are like, let's go see a scary movie. And there was precedent for scary movies, right? So I just think I think it just kind of took off based on that. In the same way as The Exorcist did, right? It sounds scary, but you don't really know what it is, right? Until you actually get into the theater and you sit down and watch it. And like you said, you just played the trailer. So it's just like, it doesn't really tell you kind of a lot of the story there. It doesn't reveal too much. Very much just like a collection of scenes put together and shown. So and
classic.
that's if you saw the trailer back in the day, right? I mean, you'd probably just see the movie advertised on like a marquee or maybe in the newspaper or
Newspaper.
something.
Yeah,
And your friends are saying, well, we should go see this movie. And I think that's just kind of how it evolved from it being released to whatever. So I think that, I mean, I like that they changed the title because I think it works a lot better. And where would we be without that title today?
right. And it's also cool how those characters became iconic. Like you look at Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasance. Even with the zombie films, and Malcolm McDowell coming in, it's impossible for me to see anybody but Donald Pleasance as Loomis.
He's established actor, right? Respected actor. He just gives the role, uh he just gives it the right amount of gravitas. Um, my favorite like my favorite sequel I think in this series is Halloween 4.
Yeah,
Um, and I love him in that movie too, but he just played it just the right amount of like he took it serious but didn't take it too seriously. And I think that's just a perfect balance of like, hamming it up a little, but at the same time being like playing it straight, right? And saying like this is a legitimate character. And Loomis has his own flaws too. Um, I didn't like the representation of him in zombies movies. We'll obviously when we get to those we'll take a deep dive into Malcolm McDowell because I love Malcolm McDowell and there's parts of his performance I really like in those films, but it's just such a hard it's a hard it's just a hard act to follow. It's hard to replicate that when you're replaying a character.
yeah,
Um and that's not a criticism on Zombie either. Or Malcolm McDowell. I think it's just really, really hard to do that in any remake when you're replaying or you're either copying and most people don't want to do that. Like most actors will not want to copy an original you know performance, right? They want to put their own spin on it, so it's not just this carbon copy. But it's really hard to do to put your own spin on an iconic character like that. And Donald Pleasance, I mean, he nails it. He nails it in all the movies that he appears in, as far as I'm concerned. And for in Halloween, I mean, it's just, he sets the tone for how dangerous Michael is, right? Like if that performance doesn't hit, then I don't know if you're as scared of Michael Myers throughout the movie as you should be. Like it's a table set for everything that comes after in the film. The way he terrorizes Laurie, the way he, the crimes that he commits before he gets to Laurie, all of that stuff is set up by Donald Pleasance in fairly expert fashion, where you take him as a credible source of information within the film, and it shapes your perception of Michael Myers even before you really kind of see him terrorizing Haddonfield.
You're 100% right, because this is the guy who's supposed to understand him and make him better, and he's terrified.
Yeah, and the fact that I can't, how many years does he says, oh, I've looked after, I've studied this guy for years, and he's given up hope. Like he's like, there's no curing this person. Like he is broken. You already know, and what's brilliant about this movie is the fact that they do introduce Michael Myers as a child, like in the opening sequence, and he commits this horrible crime. And then he's shipped away to a psychiatric hospital and is basically worked on for the next 15, 20 years. And with this doctor who's, for all intents and purposes, from what the audience understands, is a respected doctor. He's very competent, and he's given up hope. Like there's no hope for this. This guy is just pure evil, and that's what makes the character so, that's what makes Michael Myers so scary, is that there is no human component to him. And any human component that you do meet throughout, at the start of this, the first movie, is gradually erased completely throughout the course of the film, which I think is pretty scary, right? I mean, and how do you combat that? I also think the movie's aged really well because of that. It wasn't like, oh, this person's crazy, like this, the guy from the nut house escaped, like those kind of tropes that are in horror that, if you look at how we deal with mental health now, might not hold up, they might not be as sturdy. I think you can respect the fact that, some movies were made in a different time period. And, obviously looking through a 2022 lens at those movies is going to reveal some flaws. You're going to see the seams, and they're not all going to be pretty, of course. But for this film, I feel like it stands up, and that's a pretty crazy thing to say 45 years after something comes out. And not like a movie that had a massive budget, was just kind of like considered like a slasher movie, I guess, and thrown into theaters around Halloween. Let's see if we can make some money on this. But watching it now, and it still holds up, and still the idea of the essence of evil, and that the villain is irredeemable, I think is a pretty cool thing. And yeah, it still connects, right?
Not only irredeemable, but unstoppable. And that's the scariest part, because he sets up that evil force that will stop at nothing until it gets you, like the slasher Terminator, so to speak.
Right. And no real reason either. I mean, we'll get to Halloween too, but in the first movie, just random victimization is scary. And that's something that's still scary, right? Like if you're walking down the street and some random person just starts following you, not that that's happened to me, and I'm sorry if it has happened to anyone out there, but it's terrifying. It's unsettling. You don't like it. I love the shots. I think one of the best shots in this entire movie is when he's standing behind the the hedge, and he's sort of in broad daylight, and it's really hard to make something scary in broad daylight. Like it's really tough, but just it's an iconic image. It's very, very weird and unsettling. And something about this too, like the man in the mask is there was almost no reference point. There's not really any reference point for it, like when the movie was made. So the characters, when they react to seeing him, just think that, oh, it's just a guy, it's just an odd guy.
Mm-hmm.
Or a guy getting ready for Halloween or whatever. Our perception of it now would be different, right? Like, oh man, like that's not right. That looks that's super weird. So I think they did a lot of interesting, cool. Carpenter made a lot of cool calls in this movie, and I think they stand the test of time.
You're right too. The other iconic scene, like the hedge scene, I love, but I also love the laundry scene when she's looking out the window down into the backyard.
Oh
And
yeah, amazing. Yeah,
right,
100%.
because it's that fear of the unknown, and it's like, what's that dude doing? You know, why? When you don't have that answer, it messes you up.
Yeah, and also like we got to talk about Laurie Strode too. Just uh, like I don't know, Jamie Lee Curtis. We don't need to really even talk about her. Everything that's been said about her has been said about her, and how influential she has been to the genre and to the franchise and just in general. I mean, what's awesome is that she's in real life, as far as I can tell, and anyone who's ever all the interviews I've ever seen her with, is she's a genuinely awesome person too, which is
Mhm.
great. But her performance in this is pretty. I mean, she was young when she filmed this. I think she was 21, I think.
No, she was the only legit teenager on set.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So and this, like, she's phenomenal. She's really phenomenal. So it's interesting to see how that stood up over time as well.
Not only that, it tells you the work ethic too, that when John Carpenter finished working with her, he automatically wrote her into the next movie that he did called The Fog. That
Right, right,
her
right.
character was not in the original script.
Yeah. She's she's on the top of a lot of people's lists, right? As far as like most iconic actresses in film history. She's not the original final girl, obviously, but she's certainly up there. I mean, she's on the Mount Rushmore of final girls for sure, right? So
Oh, big time. She's the creator of Scream Queen, I guess we would say.
that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, fair enough.
Awesome. All right. Well, stick around because I'm going to throw a couple names by Benner and see what he would think of them as playing Dr. Loomis, because apparently they were in the running. And we'll also talk about another psycho connection to Halloween. So stick around.